It was supposed to be just another smooth first-class flight from New York to San Francisco. The air smelled like fresh leather and subtle perfume. Passengers were settling in, business chatter filling the cabin, the occasional clink of champagne. Glasses, and then she walked in, a black woman, tall, poised, early 30s, her navy blue pantsuit tailored like it was cut for royalty. Diamond studs, not flashy but elegant. A vintage leather Birkin by her side. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. She sat down quietly in seat 2A, her gaze calm, almost too calm. That's when the murmurs began. A few sideways glances, whispers, raised eyebrows, and then came her Madison, the lead flight attendant. Blonde, sharp smile, sharper tongue, always in control, always with a clipboard. She stopped, looked down at the woman in 2A like something didn't belong. "Excuse me, ma'am," Madison said, forcing a smile. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" The woman looked up slowly, calm, cool, collected. "Yes," she replied. One word, unshaken, but that was just the beginning. What no one on that flight knew, not the crew, not the passengers, was that the woman in seat 2A owned the plane. Madison didn't move. She stood there, blinking, processing. She muttered. "Right. Well, could I see your ticket then?" The woman in seat 2A, still calm, reached into her Hermes clutch, pulled out her boarding pass, held it up. Madison took it, glanced at it for a second, and then raised an eyebrow. "See, must have been a last-minute upgrade." Her voice had shifted, that subtle tone, the one laced with superiority. "We just don't see many of your type in first class," she added, almost under her breath. "Your type." The woman's eyes didn't flinch, but inside... Oh, inside. The room temperature was dropping by the second. "Is that so?" she replied smoothly. Madison laughed lightly, nervously. "Oh, no offense, of course. I just meant we're very selective with upgrades." Lie. The other passengers around began to glance over. A man in seat 2B, mid-40s, Wall Street suit, Rolex gleaming, smirked. Whispered something to the blonde woman behind him. They giggled. The billionaire sat still, poised, like a statue, sculpted from dignity. Madison gave one last forced smile. "Well, enjoy your flight," she said, turning on her heel. But before she could walk away, the woman spoke again, soft, almost like silk cutting glass. "Tell me, do you always treat first-class passengers this way?" Madison paused, half-turned. "Only when they act suspicious, ma'am." And just like that, the fire was lit. 10 minutes had passed. The engines hummed. The cabin lights dimmed to soft gold. First class was settling into quiet luxury, but the tension around seat 2A was still thick. Madison hadn't returned, but her words lingered. Suspicious. The woman, calm as ever, pulled out a hardcover book. The Psychology of Power, fitting. As she began reading, a voice came from across the aisle. "Excuse me, miss," said the man in seat 3A, early 50s, expensive suit, even more expensive ego. "Are you, sure you're supposed to be up here?" She didn't look up. "Yes." "Huh," he chuckled. "No offense, just, I thought they usually seat—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The woman closed her book, slowly turned her head. "Usually seat who?" she asked, with a voice dipped in velvet and steel. The man smirked. "Never mind." Then came Madison again, tray in hand, wine glasses clinking softly. She smiled at the man. "Mr. Peterson, you're un cabernet, aged 2010, just as you like." She handed him the glass and turned to the woman in 2A. "Would you like a beverage?" "Ma'am?" A pause. The woman smiled faintly. "Sparkling water, please." Madison nodded. "Still or sparkling?" "Sparkling." Madison walked away and came back, handed her the bottle. But no glass, no napkin, no lemon slice. Just the A bottled plastic. The billionaire took it without a word, but that look in her eyes, that look said, "You just made your second mistake." The plane had reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt light dinged off, and the air was thicker than cabin pressure. In seat 2A, the billionaire sat upright, polished, poised. Across the aisle, whispers. Behind her, stares. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. Maybe she's with someone. Maybe she's an influencer or something. I bet it's just rented. Madison came back down the aisle with her clipboard, eyes scanning the passengers. She stopped by 2A again, pretending. "To check something, then said it. We'll be serving meals shortly. For premium members only." The woman looked up. Calm, calculated. "I believe I'm a premium member." "Yes, well, we'll double-check. Sometimes those upgrades miss the system." The man in 3A, Peterson, chuckled. "You should have seen her face when you asked for ID earlier," he whispered to his seatmate. Laughter. Soft, but loud enough. The billionaire didn't flinch, but she felt it. The weight, the eyes, the heat of invisible judgments pressing in like tight air. Her phone buzzed, a message from her assistant. "Just confirming. You're on flight 287 with Elevate Air, yes? CEO's meeting is still on for tomorrow?" She smirked, typed back, "Yes. I'm already here on board, front row." Then she turned off the screen and looked straight ahead because the show was just getting started. Dinner service began. White tablecloths unfolded like ceremony, wine glasses clinked, butter knives slid across porcelain plates. Except at seat 2A. The billionaire sat there with nothing but that same plastic bottle of sparkling water. No tray, no meal, no eye contact from the crew. Madison walked past, again, and this time the woman raised her hand. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "I believe I was skipped." Madison sighed. "Oh, I assumed you had a special meal request." "Didn't. Well, we've just run out of the salmon entree. I can offer you a snack box." She didn't wait for a reply, just walked away, left her there, in silence. The man in 3A, Peterson, smirked, whispering again. The blonde woman beside him laughed. That was when a voice broke through the tension. "Excuse me, miss. It came from seat 1C, the front row, a man, early 60s, white hair, quiet dignity in his tone. He'd been silent this entire time. But now he turned to Madison. "I believe you owe this woman an apology." The cabin hushed. Madison blinked. "Excuse me, I've watched you degrade her from the moment she boarded." He turned to the billionaire. "And I don't know who you are, but I can tell by how you carry yourself. You don't belong in the seat they gave you." The billionaire raised an eyebrow. He smiled gently. "You belong in the one they built. This airline for?" Madison flushed. "Sir, please stay out of crew matters. Then do your job with the same respect you offer the others." The cabin fell into an awkward, frozen silence. The woman in 2A. She simply picked up her book and said softly, "Now that's first-class behavior." 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed further. Passengers slipped into movies, magazines, and mid-air naps, but not seat 2A. No, the woman in 2A. She reached calmly into her bag and pulled out a phone. A sleek, custom matte black phone, the kind not sold in stores. She slid on a discreet headset, typed something and waited. A faint tone rang in her ear. 1 ring, 2. Then a voice answered, "Yes, ma'am?" She spoke softly, just loud enough for the man in 1C to overhear. "I'm on flight 287. There's a matter of conduct with the in-flight crew I'd like documented." Silence on the other end. Then, "Understood. Would you like me to inform?" "The board?" The man in 1C turned his head slightly, brows raising. The woman continued, calm, composed. "Not yet. Let's wait until landing. But flag this flight. And Madison." Madison, that one word, spoken so quietly, but so dangerously. The assistant's voice came through again. "Should I also notify your legal team?" She smiled faintly. "Let's keep this internal. For now." She ended the call, slid the phone back into her bag, took a sip from her water, then turned slightly, and caught Madison staring from the galley. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Madison looked nervous. The atmosphere in first class had shifted. What used to be quiet judgment was now quiet curiosity. The whispers were no longer about what she was doing there. They were about who she really was. Did you hear her say, "Flag the flight"? That. Phone didn't look normal, no brand logo, military grade. She said, "The board." What board? Is she like FBI? Or worse, IRS? Meanwhile, Madison was rattled. She kept glancing over, her fake smile more forced than ever. She whispered to the younger stewardess beside her, "Find out who she is," quietly. "How?" the girl whispered back. Madison hissed, "Check the manifest. Cross-check with the meal list. Something." While they schemed in the galley, the woman in seat 2A, she simply adjusted her cufflinks, took another sip of water, and then she stood up, slowly, gracefully. The entire cabin turned to her, like gravity had shifted. She walked toward the lavatory, but every step echoed like footsteps in a courtroom. Passengers parted slightly. Some smiled awkwardly. Some avoided eye contact. The man in 1C gave her a small, respectful nod. She nodded back and disappeared into the restroom. In that moment, even the most arrogant ones on board started to feel small. The lavatory door clicked shut behind her. Madison seized the moment. She grabbed the manifest from the service station, fingers shaking slightly, scrolled through the names. Seat 2A. No way. Her eyes landed on the name Danielle Warren. Madison blinked. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Just Google her," whispered the younger flight attendant. Madison pulled out her phone, typing quickly, "Search Danielle Warren." The moment the screen loaded, her blood ran cold. Danielle Warren. Tech billionaire, founder of Aerocore, silent owner of Elevate Airlines. Net worth $8.2 billion. Known for testing her own companies incognito. Madison's mouth dried up. Her hand trembled as she locked the phone, but instead of owning up, instead of apologizing, she did the worst thing she could have done. She doubled down. When Danielle returned to her seat, poised as ever, Madison approached her with that same condescending tone. "So, Ms. Warren," Danielle raised an eyebrow. "Quite the surprise. You could have just said who you were from the beginning." Danielle said nothing. Madison continued, smirking. "Must be fun, playing pretend, testing the help. Very Hollywood." Silence. The air was thick again. Everyone around was listening now. "You know," Madison added, "if you had just mentioned your name, all of this could have been avoided." "That was it?" Danielle slowly removed her earpiece, turned to Madison, and in a voice that could slice through metal, "If respect requires a name tag, Madison, then it isn't respect." The entire cabin went quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Madison. She finally looked defeated. After that line, "If respect requires a name tag, then it isn't respect," you could feel the shift. Madison didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked away, head held high, but shoulders slightly sunken. And within minutes, the entire crew dynamic changed. Suddenly, the junior attendants were everywhere. One offered Danielle a fresh glass of sparkling water, in crystal. Another brought a plate of warm macadamia cookies. "Just pulled from the oven, Ms. Warren." One even offered to adjust her seat settings, bring her a blanket, and clean her sunglasses. Danielle accepted none of it. Politely, calmly, but clearly. She wasn't here to be pampered out of an apology. She was here to watch them squirm. The other passengers? Oh, the tone changed there too. Mr. Peterson from 3A suddenly remembered he had a black business partner, the blonde woman beside him. She gave Danielle an awkward thumbs up and said, "Love what you're doing in tech. I follow AeroCorps." Or, "Like I will." Even the pilot sent back a note, handwritten. "Honored to have you on board, Ms. Warren. Let us know if there's anything we can do." But Danielle just tucked it away. Then she opened her book again, calm, collected, and the entire plane sat in silence, knowing they'd just failed a test they never even saw coming. The cabin was quiet now, uncomfortably quiet, the kind of silence that didn't soothe, it exposed. Exposed intentions, exposed guilt. And Madison? She was spiraling, hiding in the galley, pretending to organize napkins that were already perfect. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out her phone again. She tapped into the crew communication app, something that linked her directly to the cockpit. Private, cabin to flight deck. "Hey, Captain, just a heads up, we've got a VIP on board. Didn't realize it earlier. Danielle Warren, the Danielle Warren." A pause, then the reply came. "Flight deck to cabin." "Copy that. Already briefed. Executive notice was sent pre-flight." "You didn't see it?" Madison's eyes widened. There was a notice? Another ping. "Flight deck to cabin. CEO of AeroCorps, silent partner of our airline. Known for boarding unannounced. Test flights usually." Madison's heart dropped. Then a final message. "Flight deck to cabin. She reports directly to the board. Suggest you keep things professional. They watch this stuff." The words hit her like turbulence. The board. Test flights. Silent partner. She'd played herself. And now? The plane was watching. Not just the passengers, not just the crew, but every eye behind every camera. Madison stepped back, hitting a metal drawer with her elbow. It clanged loudly. The young stewardess peeked in. "You okay?" Madison forced a smile. "Yeah, I just need a minute." But what she really needed was a time machine. The sun was starting to set behind the clouds. The flight had just under an hour left. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft orange glow, casting warm shadows across leather headrests and polished tray tables. But in seat 2A, things were colder than ever. Danielle closed her book. She wasn't reading anymore. She was thinking, calculating, a quiet storm forming behind calm eyes. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, the cockpit pinged again. "Corporate dispatch to flight deck." "Confirm, Ms. Warren on board Flight 287? The captain replied, "Flight deck to corporate dispatch. Affirmative, she's in 2A. Then came the line that made the captain's brow tighten. "We'll have a regional director at the gate. Executive protocol. Please inform cabin crew to remain professional and on script." Regional director? Waiting at the gate? The co-pilot leaned in. "What's going on?" The captain glanced back at the message. "Let's just say someone important's watching, and word travels fast." The flight deck called Madison through the intercom. "Cabin lead, please report to the flight deck." She froze, glanced around, took a deep breath, and walked down the aisle. As she passed Danielle's seat, their eyes met again, and in that single glance, Danielle's message was clear. "This isn't over, it's just beginning." Behind them, Mr. Peterson slowly folded his laptop, whispered to his companion, "She's not just rich, she owns the sky." The plane flew on, but tension, it stayed grounded in every passenger's chest. Madison stepped into the cockpit. The door sealed behind her with a soft click. The captain didn't turn. He was steady at the controls, scanning the skies ahead. But his tone? Ice cold. "You didn't read the notice, did you?" Madison hesitated. "No, sir." He nodded slowly, jaw tight. "Danielle Warren, Seat 2A, you were briefed, we all were." Madison swallowed hard. "I didn't expect her to blend in." The co-pilot shifted awkwardly. The captain turned slightly, eyes sharp. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was watching. A beat. And, "We failed." Madison's voice dropped. "What happens now?" The captain exhaled slowly. "You've got about 40 minutes until wheels down." When we reach the gate, there will be a regional director waiting. Corporate protocol is in motion. I suggest you don't speak unless spoken to. And when you do, don't improvise." Madison's throat tightened. "Am I being fired?" The captain didn't answer, but the silence said everything. Madison left the cockpit slowly, her face pale, breath shallow. As she stepped back into the cabin, all eyes were on her, including Danielle's, calm, focused, but sharper than ever. And for the first time since takeoff, Madison felt turbulence, not in the sky, in her career. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." His voice echoed through the cabin, calm and clear. "We're beginning our descent into San Francisco. Current temperature on the ground is 68 degrees. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." But no one was thinking about the weather. No one cared about the descent. Every passenger in first class was watching her, Danielle Warren, the woman they underestimated, the woman who never raised her voice but brought an entire crew to its knees. She sat motionless, calm. One leg crossed over the other, her hands folded in her lap. And in her silence was power. Madison shuffled down the aisle, her posture rigid, her face rehearsed. She stopped beside 2A, Ms. Warren. Danielle turned her head slightly, her eyes unreadable. "On behalf of the crew, I just want to sincerely—" Danielle raised a single hand, not high, not harsh, just enough, and Madison fell silent. The gesture was small, but it cut deeper than any insult ever could. Danielle didn't speak, didn't need to. That hand said, "You had your chance, and you wasted it." The plane touched down. Tires screeched softly against the tarmac. The cabin jolted gently, but no one clapped, no one moved. They all waited for what would happen next. As the plane taxied to the gate, a black SUV pulled up beside the jet bridge, and standing by the arrival door was a man in a navy suit with an earpiece and tablet in hand. Regional Director Corporate had arrived. The cabin door hissed open. Fresh air spilled into the jetway, but no one stood up. No one reached for their bags. Not yet. The suited man stepped onto the plane, tablet in hand. Tall, clean-cut, a silver Elevate Airlines pin gleamed on his lapel. He scanned the cabin quickly, then turned to the lead flight attendant. "Are you Madison Crowley?" Her heart skipped. She nodded slowly. Yes. You'll need to come with me." A pause. "Now." Madison forced a smile, glanced back at her fellow attendants, searching for backup. No one moved. The younger attendant looked away. The cabin crew manager stared straight ahead. Danielle didn't even look at her. She was too busy powering off her headset, sliding it carefully into a leather case. Madison stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. She passed Danielle. Their shoulders almost touched, and in a whisper barely above a breath, she muttered, "You planned this, didn't you?" Danielle didn't answer, but the slight smile on her face said everything. As Madison exited the cabin, the man in the navy suit turned back to the plane. "Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. You may now begin deplaning." Passengers stood slowly, cautiously, still glancing towards seat 2A. But Danielle, she remained seated, calm, serene, because her flight wasn't over yet. It was just about to take off. The private lounge at Gate 19 was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, the air smelled of leather chairs and high-stakes consequences. Danielle sat alone at the head of a sleek glass table. No longer a passenger, no longer undercover. Now, she was the one in control. Across from her sat the regional director, the flight operations manager, and the cabin crew supervisor. Everyone else, silent, still, waiting. Danielle leaned back, eyes sharp but steady. "Let's make this brief," she said, her voice soft but cutting. "I boarded that flight expecting to observe staff behavior on a standard high-tier route." She paused. "What?" I got was discrimination, condescension, and a crew that only found its manners once they Googled my name. The flight ops manager shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Warren, we sincerely apologize. Danielle raised a hand. Don't. Her tone froze the room. This wasn't just about one flight attendant. It was a culture. I saw it in the way the crew looked the other way. I saw it in the passengers who laughed instead of spoke up. She let the words sit. Burn. I've flown with Elevate Air since the beginning. I helped build this airline, and I refuse to let it carry my name while carrying that kind of behavior. She opened her tablet, tapped the screen. Effective immediately, I'm launching a full audit of first-class operations, including secret shopper protocols, bias training, and mandatory on-ground review of all regional leads. A beat. Madison. Crowley's employment status will be handled by corporate HR, but I want a personal report on my desk tomorrow. The regional director nodded quickly. Danielle stood, adjusted her coat, looked at them one last time. Remember this moment, not because I'm Danielle Warren, the billionaire, but because next time it might be someone without the power to speak. She turned, walked toward the lounge exit, and for the first time that day, everyone else was the one holding their breath. The next morning, it started with a tweet, just one, from a young journalist who'd been on the same flight, seated quietly in row 5. Witnessed something surreal yesterday. Black woman in first class got disrespected by crew. Turns out she's the silent owner of the airline. Her name, Danielle Warren. The tweet hit 10,000 likes in under an hour. Then came the photos. Danielle boarding, Danielle seated, Danielle refusing wine served in plastic. Then came the video, a shaky phone clip. 27 seconds, Madison whispering, "You planned this, didn't you?" And Danielle's faint smile. Boom, viral. News outlets picked it up by noon. Billionaire exposes racism at 30,000 feet. Vox CEO goes undercover. Fires flight attendant in epic power move. Business Insider. Passenger no one respected. Until everyone did. The Guardian talk shows ran with it. Podcasts dissected every quote. TikTok turned the moment her hand stopped Madison mid-apology into a meme. This isn't over. You had your chance. And then the wave of confessions came. Other passengers who'd experienced microaggressions on flights. Other employees who once worked under Madison. One post read, "She told me to stop smiling too much on flights. Said it was unprofessional for someone who looked like me." Elevate Air trended for 3 days straight. Stock dipped 4%, then bounced back when Danielle went on record. "We won't lose value, we'll gain character." The world watched, and for the first time in a long time, a woman didn't have to raise her voice to make history. She just had to be heard, and now everyone was listening. Madison Crowley sat in her apartment, blinds drawn, phone on silent, laptop open to a browser window she wished didn't exist. Flight attendant fired after disrespecting black billionaire. Internet demands lifetime ban. Madison Crowley trended for all the wrong reasons. There were screenshots, threads, former co-workers chiming in. Not surprised. She once told me to stop wearing my natural hair on flights. She used to call economy passengers the peasants. Even anonymous pilot forums lit up. She bullied new crew like it was her job. Power trip, that's all she ever chased. Her LinkedIn profile, gone. Her company email, deactivated. She picked up her phone, hands trembling. One unread message. From her mother. "Madison, what did you do?" And another. From someone she hadn't heard from in years, her former best friend. "You should have apologized, Mads. That woman deserved better. So did a lot of us." She threw the phone on the couch, buried her face in her hands. It wasn't the job she missed. It was the certainty, the belief that her world, her privilege, and couldn't be touched. But now, she was watching it crumble in real time. Meanwhile, across the city, in a high-rise boardroom, Danielle Warren was preparing for a new press conference. calm, focused, not to punish, but to teach. Because what happened in Seat 2A wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who'd ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. The press conference was standing room only. CNN, the New York Times, Forbes, even late-night comedians sent writers. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted a reaction. But what they got was a revelation. Danielle Warren stepped onto the stage, dressed in charcoal grey, sharp yet simple. No diamonds, no bodyguards, just presence. She approached the podium, looked out at the flashing cameras, and waited. Waited for them to stop watching through their lenses. Waited until they were listening. Then she spoke. "I didn't come here to cancel anyone." Silence. "I didn't come here to play victim or hero or billionaire." She paused. "I came here to talk about visibility." Another pause. Longer, heavier. Because when a black woman walks into first class, and the first question she hears is, "Are you lost?" That's not curiosity. That's conditioning. Murmurs in the crowd. Danielle didn't flinch. When respect only comes after recognition, after Googling my name, that's not courtesy, that's compliance. She leaned forward, voice softer now. "What happened to me has happened. To people who didn't own the plane, and to people who couldn't afford to speak up." Her voice cracked just once, enough to remind the world she wasn't a brand, she was a human being. So no, this isn't about revenge, it's about recognition. And from now on every Elevate Air flight, we will train our staff, not just to serve with grace, but to see with it. Cameras clicked, reporters typed like their keyboards were on fire, but no one interrupted. Because in that moment, Danielle Warren wasn't just a billionaire. She was the voice for millions who'd been silenced at 30,000 feet. The days following Danielle's press conference felt different. Airlines across the country re-evaluated their training. Hashtags changed tone from anger to accountability, and then, slowly, one by one, the passengers from Flight 287 began to speak. A post from Mr. Peterson, "Zit 3A." I laughed, I whispered, I assumed, and I was wrong. Watching Ms. Warren speak made me realize I've been the quiet problem in too many rooms. This is my apology, not just to her, but to everyone I've ever judged by skin before sentence. A tweet from the blonde woman beside him. I said nothing. That was my choice and my failure. Thank you, Danielle, for reminding me that silence doesn't make you innocent. It makes you complicit. Even the young male flight attendant, the one who'd looked away while Madison sneered, posted a video. I was scared to speak up. I thought I'd lose my job, but watching you stand there, silent in seat 2A, you taught me that dignity doesn't whisper. It radiates. Thank you. None of them expected responses, but they posted anyway, because some apologies don't need acceptance. They just need to exist. And Danielle? She didn't comment. She didn't retweet. She simply posted a single sentence on her private feed. We rise not by proving others wrong, but by showing them what right looks like. No hashtags, no mic drops, just grace. And for the first time since Flight 287, the world began to feel a little lighter. 6 weeks later, Flight 8119 from LA to Chicago. Business as usual, except for one thing. Near the end of boarding, a woman stepped onto the plane, tall, elegant, black. She wore a navy blue blazer, gold watch, and walked with quiet confidence. The flight attendant greeting her, a young woman with fresh eyes, smiled genuinely. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Robinson," the woman said. "First class, 2A. The flight attendant checked the manifest, paused, looked back up at her. "You're all set. May I take your bag?" "I've got it, thank you." She walked down the aisle. Heads turned, but no one questioned her. No one whispered. No one asked, "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" because the shadow of Seat 2A was still flying ahead of her. Back at headquarters, in an office high above the clouds, Danielle Warren stood by a window, watching a plane take off. A soft smile played on her lips. She wasn't thinking about revenge or ratings. She was thinking about how long it takes for the world to learn how to see. Behind her, a whiteboard read, "Next, elevate international expansion with dignity, with equity, with eyes wide open." The sky was quiet, peaceful. Somewhere at 30,000 feet, another black woman sipped her champagne and smiled because this time no one dared to ask her name. The end.